Every war in galactic history followed predictable rules until humans entered combat and those rules stopped applying. This is not a story about better weapons. It's about what happens when a species refuses to fight the way logic expects. Kurith had watched soldiers die for 30 cycles, but nothing prepared him for this particular brand of absurdity. The holographic display flickered in the command center, casting blue light across his four eyes while he sat frozen, mandibles slightly apart in what any Vryn would recognize as profound confusion. The footage looped for the 7th time. 17 elite shock troopers, 1 human, 2 laughably antiquated firearms. 0 survivors on the Vryn side. Replay segment 4 alpha again. Kurith clicked to the analysis drone hovering near his workstation. The drone complied without comment because unlike Kurith it lacked the capacity for existential dread. Senior tactical analyst was supposed to be a respectable position. 3 decades of service, 47 campaign assessments, 6 commendations for strategic accuracy. Kurith had predicted fleet movements, analyzed enemy supply lines and correctly forecasted battle outcomes with 94% reliability. He had never in all those cycles written a report that began with the phrase "conventional military theory has become functionally useless." He was about to start now. Kurith's service record spoke for itself, though he rarely bothered speaking of it himself. 47 campaigns across 6 spiral arms. He had analyzed the Kelthrin swarm's hive tactics on Praxis 9, predicted the Zolthari defensive collapse at Crimson Gate, and personally restructured the invasion protocol that brought the Methodian collective to terms in under 4 planetary rotation. His Caton bore 3 scars from actual combat postings. Back when he was young and stupid enough to think field experience built character instead of trauma. The Vryn Empire did not conquer territory through luck or numerical advantage, despite what the propaganda networks claimed. They won because they calculated. Every invasion followed doctrine refined over 2,000 cycles of warfare. Orbital superiority first, atmospheric denial second, ground forces third, but only after aerial reconnaissance mapped every defensive position down to individual weapon emplacements. Shock troopers deployed in 17-unit formations because mathematical models proved 17 was the optimal number for urban penetration, tunnel clearing and facility seizure. Each trooper carried plasma repeaters calibrated to pierce standard military shielding, wore armor that could withstand directed energy weapons up to Class 7, and trained for 4 cycles before seeing actual deployment. It worked. It always worked. Until humanity. The Earth problem started 6 months ago when a Vryn scout fleet made first contact near the species' home system. Initial assessments classified them as primitive, aggressive, and catastrophically attached to projectile weapons that belonged in a museum. They had barely achieved faster-than-light travel. Their largest vessels massed less than a Vryn frigate. High Command authorized expansion into human territory with the same enthusiasm one might reserve for claiming an undefended asteroid field. Target 77 Blue was supposed to be routine, a minor colony world, population roughly 40,000, limited orbital defenses, no military fleet in system. The invasion force was actually smaller than standard protocol recommended because why waste resources on what amounted to a cleanup operation? Kurith had flagged 3 minor concerns in his preliminary assessment. Human psychological profile suggested unusual aggression. Their weapons technology, while primitive, showed bizarre versatility, and there was something in the cultural data about entertainment media that bothered him, though he could not articulate why watching recordings of humans shooting each other for fun felt relevant. His concerns were noted, filed and completely ignored. Commander Thurek had actually laughed, which sounded like rocks grinding in a disposal unit. They fight with chemical propellants, Kurith. We have plasma. This is mathematics. Mathematics, it turned out, had failed to account for insanity. The War Council convened in the Dominance, the fleet's command carrier, with all the ceremonial weight such occasions demanded. Kurith attended remotely, his holographic projection shimmering at the edge of the circular table, while senior officers occupied physical space like they occupied star systems. With absolute confidence, Commander Thurek stood at the center, all 8 feet of decorated chiding and military certitude. His tactical display rotated slowly, showing Target 77 Blue in nauseating detail. Human defensive capabilities are, to employ technical terminology, laughable. Satellite network is civilian grade. Ground installations use reinforced concrete, which our plasma repeaters cut through like tissue. Air support consists of chemically powered aircraft that barely break supersonic speeds. Vice Commander Lacasse gestured toward the planetary scan. Population centers show minimal fortification. Intelligence suggests most humans on this colony are farmers. Technicians and support personnel. Military presence is estimated at 400 individuals, poorly distributed across 6 settlements. Arms? Someone asked from the far side of the table. Primitive kinetic weapons. Rifles that fire metal slugs using controlled explosions. Some crew-served weapons. Anti-vehicle missiles. Nothing that threatens armored units. La Caisse actually sounded bored. Their most advanced anti-personnel weapon appears to be something called a shotgun, which sprays multiple projectiles in a cone pattern. Effective range perhaps 30 meters. Laughter chittered around the table. 30 meters. Rune plasma repeaters remained lethal at 400. The Reich expanded the invasion timeline. Standard protocol. Orbital bombardment of military installations at hour 0. Atmospheric fighters establish air superiority by hour 2. Shock trooper deployment begins hour 4. Focused on primary population center. 17-unit formation staggered insertion pattern. Resistance should collapse within 18 hours once they comprehend the futility of their position. Kurth's hologram raised one foreclaw. Commander, if I may. The Reich's mandibles tightened, but he gestured permission. Human cultural data shows concerning patterns. Their entertainment frequently glorifies individual combat, particularly scenarios where numerically inferior forces prevail through unconventional tactics. They have a phrase, bring a gun to a knife fight. It suggests an obsession with overwhelming firepower applied unpredictably. Entertainment is not doctrine. The Reich said flatly. No, but it reveals psychology. Humans train for scenarios where nothing goes according to plan. They seem to expect chaos. Then they will be disappointed, La Caisse interjected. We do not provide chaos. We provide systematic suppression followed by organized occupation. Their expectations are irrelevant. Kurth tried once more. The weapons concern me. Not because they are dangerous, but because they are so many. Every human appears to own multiple firearms. Some own dozens. Why maintain such redundancy unless your tactical doctrine assumes equipment loss or specialized application? The Reich's secondary eyes narrowed. Kurth, your caution is noted and disregarded. We have conquered species with energy shields, powered armor and orbital defense networks. These humans fight with gunpowder and optimism. The hologram winked out. Kurth sat alone in his analysis chamber, looking at cultural data he could not adequately explain, feeling dread he could not adequately justify. He began drafting contingency reports. No one would read. The initial assault unfolded with textbook precision, which should have been Kurth's first warning that everything was about to go catastrophically wrong. Orbital strikes vaporized 3 military installations at 0400 local time. Secondary bombardment collapsed the colony's communication hub, 2 vehicle depots and what intelligence identified as an ammunition production facility. Atmospheric fighters swept the skies by 0600, encountering exactly 0 resistance because the humans apparently did not believe in maintaining air patrols during peacetime. Peacetime, Kurth muttered to himself, monitoring data feeds from his station. They were in peacetime right up until they were not. Shock trooper transports began landing at 900. 17-unit formations deployed across 6 insertion zones, moving through morning fog toward population centers with the mechanical efficiency that made the Vren Empire functionally unstoppable. Squad Alpha 1 reported light resistance near the primary settlement. 3 humans with rifles, firing from a retail establishment that sold agricultural equipment. The humans managed 4 shots before plasma fire reduced their position to slag and regret. Squad Alpha 4 encountered 2 humans in a ground vehicle, both armed with shotguns. The vehicle exploded. The humans did not. By hour 6, the invasion was proceeding ahead of schedule, which meant Kurth was watching his displays with increasing unease while everyone else celebrated preliminary success. The reports bothered him, not the casualties. Those were expected. What bothered him was what the casualties were wearing. Thermal imaging shows human combatants in standard civilian clothing, he said to no one in particular, because talking to yourself was still talking and therefore felt productive. No armor, no uniforms, no coordination markers. A message pinged from Squad Beta 3. Encountered resistance at water treatment facility. 5 hostiles eliminated. They were wearing, and Kurth had to read this twice, colorful fabric coverings with entertainment slogans printed on them. One human had died wearing a shirt that said Weekend Warrior. Another wore something called a baseball cap. Kurth pulled up combat doctrine files, cross-referencing with 47 previous campaigns. Every species the Vren had fought wore something. Body armor, environmental suits, ceremonial war paint, tactical exoskeletons, anything that signaled, I am a soldier engaged in combat. Even the Kelthrin swarm had biological carapace modifications. Humans showed up to lethal military engagement looking like they had been interrupted during leisure time. Squad Gamma 7 reported taking fire from a residential structure. 6 humans, mixed ages, armed with various rifles. They fortified their position using furniture. When plasma fire breached the walls, they retreated through a back entrance while providing covering fire with, according to the tactical readout, pump-action shotguns and semi-automatic rifles. No powered armor, no energy shields, no support drones, just humans and guns and apparently limitless audacity. Forward units. This is command. Thurek's voice cut through the communication network. Resistance is scattered and disorganized. Maintain formation integrity. Suppress all hostiles. Proceed to Phase 2 objectives. Kareth opened a private channel. Commander, I am observing unusual patterns. The humans are not fighting like soldiers. They are fighting like citizens who happen to own military-grade weapons. There is no command structure we can identify, no supply lines we can cut, no strategic positions they are defending with coordinated intent. A long pause. Then, so they are disorganized and doomed. How is this a problem? Kareth did not have a good answer. Not yet, but Squad Beta 9 was about to provide one. Squad Beta 9 approached the warehouse complex at 1347 hours, following standard clearing protocols that had worked flawlessly across 4 dozen military campaigns. The structure was unremarkable. Corrugated metal walls, loading docks, exterior signage identifying it as a storage facility for construction materials. Thermal scans showed one heat signature inside. 1. Squad leader Verex made the tactical assessment any competent officer would make. Single hostile, enclosed space, 17 trained shock troopers with plasma repeaters. This would take approximately 90 seconds. His estimate was off by about 85 seconds. Kareth watched the helmet camera feeds from all 17 troopers simultaneously, his analysis training allowing him to process multiple video streams without cognitive strain. He saw Verex signal the breach, saw 4 troopers move to the main entrance while others covered secondary exits, saw the door mechanisms override and the squad pour inside with practiced efficiency. The warehouse interior was dim, cluttered with metal shelving units and industrial equipment. The human stood in the center of the space, approximately 30 meters from the entrance, making no attempt to hide or seek cover. He was wearing blue pants and a red shirt. He was holding 2 revolvers. Contact, Verex transmitted. Single hostile, armed with primitive kinetics. Demand surrender. The human did not surrender. The human smiled, which Kareth would later describe in his report as profoundly unsettling given the tactical circumstances. Those are revolvers, Trooper Hex said over squad communication, his voice carrying what might have been amusement. Chemical propellant, rotating cylinder, manual trigger, antiques. My grandfather has one in a display case. Hostile. Drop your weapons, Verex called out in adequately translated human language. The human said something back. Kareth would later have the phrase analyzed. It translated roughly to, "You first, Bugman." Verex raised his plasma repeater. The human moved. Except, moved was not the correct word for what happened next, because movement implied physics and causality, and Kareth watched the footage 17 times and still could not explain how a biological organism accomplished what the cameras recorded. The human was standing still. Then the human was not standing still. There was no transitional phase that Kareth's eyes could identify. The revolvers came up, there was a sound like compressed thunder, and Trooper Mach's helmet display went dark as kinetic projectiles punched through his visor at velocities that should not have been possible from manual firearms. Vex opened fire. 16 other plasma repeaters joined him. The warehouse lit up like a small sun as directed energy weapons turned air into ionized plasma and metal shelving into molten debris. The human was not where the plasma went, he was sideways, both revolvers firing, and Troopers Jex and Lethan dropped simultaneously with catastrophic chest trauma. The human rolled, which was a normal combat maneuver. Then he came up shooting, while moving backward at a speed that Kareth's analysts would later calculate exceeded peak human sprinting velocity. Except he was not sprinting, he was walking backward and firing both weapons independently at separate targets. Trooper Urkath tried to track him. Plasma bolts scorched the concrete floor 3 meters behind where the human had been a fraction of a second ago. Return fire caught Urkath in the throat, right in the armor seal, because apparently this human understood Vrin equipment vulnerabilities better than some Vrin troopers. Scatter formation, Verex screamed, which was the correct tactical response, except it did not matter. The human spun, dropped to one knee, and fired both revolvers simultaneously. 2 troopers fell. He stood, ejected spent casings with a flick of his wrists. that somehow looked casual, reloaded both weapons in under 2 seconds using fresh ammunition from his belt, and shot Trooper Nunvex through the eye while Nunvex was actively taking cover behind a metal support beam. The bullet curved. Karith would later verify this in frame-by-frame analysis. The projectile entered at an angle that suggested minor trajectory deflection off the beam's edge, but the deflection was too precise, too controlled. Physics did not work that way. Bullets did not work that way. Humans, apparently, did not care. Squad Beta 9 had trained for 4 cycles. They had superior weapons, superior armor, superior numbers and superior tactical positioning. At the 90-second mark the last trooper fell. The human stood among 17 corpses, calmly reloading both revolvers, whistling something melodic. Karith sat in his analysis chamber, watching the archived footage, mandibles frozen in an expression of horror. He began typing his report with trembling claws. Karith isolated the footage, slowing it down to 1/10 speed, then 1/100th. He needed to understand. Understanding was his function, his purpose, the reason the Ren Empire paid him to sit in climate-controlled chambers and make sense of chaos. This was not making sense. Frame 1847. The human stood centered in the warehouse, arms at sides, revolvers held loosely. Muscle tension analysis suggested relaxation, not combat readiness. His heart rate, extrapolated from micro-movements visible in thermal imaging, was 72 beats per minute. 72. Resting rate for the species. Frame 1850. Varex's plasma repeater achieved firing position, targeting laser painted the human's chest. Frame 1851. The human was 4 meters to the left, not moving left, not in the process of dodging, simply existing in a different location, both revolvers extended, already firing. Karith backed up the footage, enhanced the frames between 1850 and 1851. The analysis software identified a blur but not motion blur from high-speed movement. Something else. The human appeared to compress and expand simultaneously, occupying multiple positions across a single frame. Impossible, Karith clicked. He sent the data to the physics analysis team. They confirmed. Impossible. Human musculature could not generate that acceleration. Human skeletal structure would shatter under those G-forces. Human neural processing could not coordinate targeting solutions while moving at velocities that exceeded their own visual processing speed. Yet the footage did not lie. Frame 1902. Trooper Malik fell, the first casualty. The revolver's muzzle flash registered at 89.92 meters per second. Standard velocity for that class of chemical propellant weapon. The bullet's impact velocity measured 1,040 meters per second. The bullet had accelerated after leaving the barrel. Karith highlighted this finding in red, sent it to ballistics analysis, received a response 12 minutes later that consisted of a single word. How? The human continued moving through the warehouse like physics was optional. He rolled behind a support pillar while plasma fire vaporized the air where he had been. Normal combat roll, standard human kinesiology. Then he emerged from the opposite side of the pillar, both revolvers firing, and somehow he was 3 meters higher than when he entered the roll, shooting downward at troopers Jex and Lathan from an elevated position that did not exist. There was no elevated position, just floor and pillar in air. The human had been airborne, without jumping, without propulsion, without violating the conservation of momentum. Except he absolutely had violated it because Kareth's instruments did not detect any thrust signature, gravitic manipulation or localized field distortion. The human simply decided that up was a direction he wanted to occupy, and reality complied. Squad Beta 9 tried adapting. Varex ordered suppression fire, a valid tactic. Saturate the area with plasma, deny movement space, force the hostile into a kill zone. 16 repeaters fired simultaneously, creating an overlapping field of superheated death that covered 47 square meters. The human stood in the center of it untouched, firing both revolvers with what Karith could only describe as theatrical precision. Not because the plasma missed. The plasma hit. Thermal imaging confirmed impact. The human's clothing showed scorch marks. His skin should have flash vaporized. Instead, he rolled his shoulders like the plasma tickled shot Trooper Aketh in the throat, and moved again. He is deflecting plasma with localized shielding, Karith hypothesized aloud, because that made more sense than the alternative. The alternative was that the human was simply too stubborn to die and had convinced physics to respect that stubbornness. Frame 256. Trooper Scass attempted close combat, a desperation move but theoretically sound. Thran possessed superior strength, superior reach, superior close quarters combat training. He closed to 3 meters, blade extended. The human shot him 6 times in under 1 second, 3 rounds from each revolver, cycling targets, never missing. Cass fell, The human ejected spent casings. Kareth watched, frame by frame, as 12 empty brass cylinders arced through the air, glinting in the warehouse's emergency lighting. The human's hands moved in fluid motions, pulling fresh ammunition from his belt, loading each revolver with 6 rounds. Total reload time 1.8 seconds, during which troopers Pilex, Donath and Tivas fired 34 plasma bolts at center mass from 3 different angles, creating a triangulated kill zone that eliminated all escape vectors. The human finished reloading, raised both revolvers and shot all 3 troopers before their next volley charged. He had reloaded, acquired 3 targets, calculated firing solutions, and executed kills in the time it took a plasma repeater to cycle. Verrex tried the only tactic remaining: full retreat. He ordered the squad to disengage, fall back to the entrance, request air support. Sound tactical decision, not cowardice. Pure survival calculus. The human shot the door controls. The main entrance sealed. Secondary exits. Verrex transmitted, voice cracking with something the Ren language had limited vocabulary for: pure distilled fear. The remaining 9 troopers ran, not tactically retreating, running. Panic flight. The human walked after them, whistling, not jogging, not sprinting, walking at what thermal analysis suggested was 4.2 kilometers per hour, standard human pedestrian pace. He caught them anyway. Trooper Nauvex tried hiding behind a forklift. The bullet found him through a gap, 8 centimeters wide, traveling a curved trajectory that ballistics teams would later argue about for weeks. Trooper Seka discharged his entire plasma cell in wild suppression fire. 47 bolts, 0 hits. The human's return fire took Seka's primary lung with surgical precision. By frame 2047, only Velrex remained, backed into a corner, weapon empty, mandibles clicking the Vren prayer for honored death. The human stopped 3 meters away, revolvers pointed downward. He spoke. Later translation: "You boys should have stayed home." Then he shot Velrex once, center mass, and holstered both weapons. The human left through a side door, still whistling, stepping over 17 corpses like they were discarded equipment. Kareth stopped the playback. He had watched death before. He had never watched impossibility. Kareth summoned every specialist the fleet carried: physicists, combat analysts, xenobiologists, weapons experts, even a philosopher whose primary function was explaining why other species behaved incomprehensibly. They gathered in the analysis theater, all watching the same footage Kareth had been watching for 6 hours straight. No one spoke for the first 3 minutes. Then everyone spoke simultaneously. Gravitational anomaly, the physics specialist insisted, gesturing at the frames showing the human's impossible movements. Local field manipulation, possibly implanted technology. No field signatures detected, Kareth countered, highlighting the sensor data. No electromagnetic variants. No exotic particle emissions. Nothing. The xenobiologist expanded a thermal image. Adrenaline response. Human endocrine systems produce chemical compounds that enhance strength and pain tolerance during stress. Perhaps we underestimated the magnitude. Adrenaline does not violate conservation of momentum, the physicist snapped. It does not allow organisms to teleport 4 meters laterally or accelerate bullets after they leave the barrel. Then what does? The xenobiologist clicked back. Silence. The philosopher, an elderly Vren named Qualith, who had advised 3 high commanders, leaned forward. "Show me other encounters." Kareth had been dreading this. He pulled up 17 additional combat reports from the last 4 days across Target 77 Blue. Each one showed variations of the same inexplicable nightmare. Squad Gamma 3, ambushed by 2 humans with rifles. 12 troopers, 0 survivors. The humans fired from positions that geometry insisted they could not occupy. Squad Delta 7, engaged 4 humans defending a residence. 15 troopers deployed with armored support. The humans killed the vehicle crew through 40 centimeters of composite armor using weapons classified as anti-personnel only. Squad Alpha 12 encountered a single human female with a shotgun. She killed 9 troopers while sustaining injuries that should have incapacitated her 3 times over. Medical scans recovered post-mortem showed she had been shot twice during the engagement. She kept fighting for 4 minutes after the second hit. Pattern recognition, Kareth announced, highlighting data points across all engagements. Humans demonstrate consistent performance enhancement during combat that exceeds baseline physiology by factors ranging from 300 to 800%. Enhancement increases proportionally with danger level. The more threatened they are, the more impossible they become. Impossible is not a technical term, the physicist objected weakly. Then provide me a technical term for bullets that curve, humans who move faster than their nervous systems should allow, and warriors who survive plasma burns through apparent willpower, Kareth said. Mandibles tight. Korliyath spoke quietly. Fear response. We are seeing their fear response. They show no fear, the combat analyst said, rewinding to the warehouse human's face. Calm, almost cheerful. Elevated heart rate barely reaches 90, no panic markers. Not their fear, Koleth clarified. Ours. We fear them, so we perceive them as more dangerous than they are. Psychological projection affecting our sensor interpretation. Kureth had considered this. He pulled up raw sensor data, mathematical certainty untouched by perception, distance measurements, velocity calculations, impact force readings. All confirmed what the video showed. The sensors are not afraid, he said simply. A message arrived from High Command, flagged urgent. Kureth opened it, already knowing what it would say. Commander Thrake's face appeared. All earlier confidence replaced with something Kureth had never seen in a Vrin commander, confusion bordering on terror. All ground operations suspended immediately. Recall all shock troop formations. We need explanations, Kureth. The Council is demanding explanations. Kureth looked at the frozen image of the human mid-reload, surrounded by corpses whistling. Commander, he said carefully, I have spent 30 cycles analyzing warfare. I have no explanation, only observations, which are, humans do not fight like soldiers. They fight like humans, and we have no doctrine for that. The emergency session convened 8 hours after High Command suspended ground operations. Kurth attended physically this time, standing in the Dominance's primary strategy chamber surrounded by officers who looked like they had individually witnessed the heat death of the universe. Commander Thrak stood at the center, carapace somehow appearing dimmer than before. Casualties across all ground units 63%, territorial control negligible, strategic objectives achieved 0. This is by any measurement a catastrophic failure. Vice Commander Lacasse pulled up tactical displays. Standard protocols are producing inverse results. Concentrated fire attracts human attention and apparently triggers enhanced combat performance. Dispersed formations allow humans to defeat units individually. Armored support becomes priority targets. Aerial bombardment cannot achieve precision because humans move unpredictably between targeting and impact. We are fighting optimally. Another officer clicked in frustration. Textbook execution. Doctrine refined over 2,000 cycles. It should work. It works against species that follow physics. Kureth said quietly. Every eye fixed on him, he continued, because someone had to say it. Humans do not follow our understanding of physics consistently, or they follow different physics. Or physics itself operates differently around humans under combat stress. I do not know which explanation is correct, but the result is identical. Our doctrine assumes predictability. Humans provide none. Thrake's mandibles worked silently for a moment. Recommendations. Kureth activated his compiled analysis. Immediate tactical revision. First, avoid engagement with armed humans unless absolutely necessary. Second, if engagement is unavoidable, maximum force applied from maximum distance. Third, never, under any circumstances, allow close quarters combat. Fourth, if a human is observed carrying 2 weapons simultaneously, retreat is mandatory, not optional. Retreat. Lacasse sounded scandalized. We have orbital superiority, technological advantage, numerical supremacy, and 63% casualties. Kureth interrupted, which was professionally suicidal, but he was beyond caring. Squad Beta 9 had all those advantages. They had 17 troopers against 1 human with antique revolvers. That human is still alive. Beta 9 is not. He displayed the warehouse footage one more time, forced them to watch. Observe his ammunition capacity. 12 rounds total before reloading. Any trooper who survived past his 12th shot could have neutralized him during reload time, but he reloaded in under 2 seconds while evading plasma fire. Standard doctrine says suppressing fire creates opportunity. Against humans, suppressing fire wastes energy and reveals your position. Kureth advanced to another clip. Squad Gamma 3 attempted flanking maneuvers, proper spacing, overlapping fields of fire. The humans split their attention, engaged targets in multiple directions, simultaneously with accuracy that should require dedicated targeting computers. They processed battlefield information faster than our troopers could adapt. The philosopher Koleth spoke up. What you are describing is not superior training. This is fundamental incompatibility between our warfare model and human combat psychology. Correct, Kureth agreed. We fight to achieve objectives. We calculate, we plan, we execute with precision. Humans fight like fighting is the objective. They do not care about territory or resources or strategic position. They care about winning the immediate engagement through whatever means necessary. Logic optional. The rake slumped slightly, a posture Kureth had never seen from him. New engagement protocols. Minimum engagement range 400 meters. Maximum squad dispersion. If humans demonstrate enhanced performance capabilities, full withdrawal to orbital support range, no heroic stands, no attempts to salvage tactical pride, we are abandoning the ground, Lacasse said flatly. We are acknowledging reality, Thray countered. Kareth, compile your analysis into new tactical guidelines, distribution across all combat units within 4 hours. The meeting dissolved into smaller strategy groups, officers arguing about how to restructure 2,000 cycles of military tradition around one impossible species. Kareth returned to his chamber, began writing. New Rule 1. If you see a human with 1 gun, exercise extreme caution. New Rule 2. If you see a human with 2 guns, you are already dead, you just have not stopped moving yet. He wondered if High Command would approve that phrasing. He wondered if it mattered. Across the planet below, humans continued defending their homes with chemical propellants and absolute refusal to behave according to anyone's expectations. The Vryn Empire, for the first time in living memory, had no answer. Kareth filed his final report at 0300 hours when the command center was quiet except for the hum of environmental processors and the distant thrum of engines maintaining orbital position. 30 cycles of service. 47 campaigns. 94% accuracy predicting outcomes. Target 77 Blue would not be outcome 48. He pulled up the warehouse footage one last time, watching the human with his revolvers moving like reality was negotiable, whistling like slaughter was background music. Kareth had spent his entire career analyzing how species fought. He understood Kelthrin's swarm dynamics, Zolfari defensive philosophy, Methodian tactical rigidity. He had never considered that some species might approach warfare less as science and more as enthusiastic improvisation with lethal consequences. The primitiveness of human weapons was not a weakness, he realized now. It was a feature. A species that conquered their own world using chemical propellants and manual triggers had spent millennia refining the art of making those primitives absolutely devastating. They did not need plasma technology. They had optimized murder using tools their ancestors invented thousands of cycles ago. That should have been terrifying from the start. High Command was already drafting withdrawal plans, political language to explain why the Vryn Empire was abandoning an invasion for the first time in recorded history. They would call it strategic repositioning, resource reallocation, revised priority. Kareth knew what it actually was. Retreat, because somewhere on that planet, a human was cleaning 2 revolvers, reloading ammunition belts, and waiting patiently for the next squad of troopers stupid enough to think superior technology mattered more than superior stubbornness. The Vryn had brought plasma to a gunfight. The humans brought guns. Turns out, guns were enough. This conflict proved that warfare is not decided by superior technology alone, but by adaptability under pressure. Humanity survived because they embraced uncertainty, made rapid decisions, and refused to behave predictably. In war, and in life, those who adapt fastest often defeat those who calculate the longest.